You wanted freedom from that life. You wanted freedom to make your own money. You wanted freedom to make deals with Netflix and Spotify, but you also wanted to serve the Queen.
Yeah, well, we didn't want to give up, or we didn't want to turn our backs on the associations and the people that we'd been supporting.
But also, Oprah, it exists.
Yeah, but it exists. But also the Netflix and the Spotify of it all. That was never part of the plan.
Yeah,
because you didn't have a plan.
Well, we didn't have a plan. That was suggested by somebody else. By the point of where my family literally cut me off financially, and I had to afford security for us.
Wait, hold up, wait a minute. Your family cut you off?
Yeah, in the first quarter of 2020. But I've got what my mum left me, and without that, we would not have been able to do this.
Okay.
So, touching back on what you were asking, what my mum would think of this, I think she saw it coming. And I certainly felt her presence throughout this whole process. And for me, I'm just really relieved and happy to be sitting here talking to you with my wife by my side. Because I can't begin to imagine what it must have been like for her going through this process by herself all those years ago, because it has been unbelievably tough for the two of us, but at least we had each other.
What's your relationship like now with your family?
I've spoken to more to my grandmother in the last year than I have done for many, many years.
Do you hold Zoom calls?
We did a couple of Zoom calls with Archie.
Yes, I could see Archie.
Yeah.
My grandmother and I have a really good relationship and an understanding, and I have a deep respect for her. She's my colonel-in-chief, right? She always will be.
Your relationship with your father? Is he taking your calls now?
Yeah, he is. There's a lot to work through there. I feel really let down because he's been through something similar. He knows what pain feels like. And Archie's his grandson. But at the same time, of course I will always love him. But there's a lot of hurt that's happened, and I will continue to make it one of my priorities to try and heal that relationship. But they only know what they know. And that's the thing. I've tried to...
Or what they're told.
Or what they're told. And I've tried to educate them through the process that I have been educated.
Because is it like being in a big royal bubble?
Yeah.
Yeah. And your brother relationship? Much has been said about that.
Yeah, and much will continue to be said about that. As I said before, I love William to bits. He's my brother. We've been through hell together, and we have a shared experience. But we were on different paths.
Well, what is particularly striking is what Meghan shared with us earlier, is that no one wants to admit that there's anything about race, or that race has played a role in the trolling and the vitriol. And yet, Meghan shared with us that there was a conversation with you about Archie's skin tone. What was that conversation?
That conversation I'm never going to share. But at the time it was awkward. I was a bit shocked.
Can you tell us what the question was?
No, I'm not comfortable sharing that.
Okay.
But that was right at the beginning, right?
Like, what will the baby look like?
Yeah, what will the kids look like?
Yeah, what will the kids look like?
But that was right at the beginning, when she wasn't going to get security, when members of my family were suggesting that she carries on acting because there's not enough money to pay for her and all this sort of stuff. Like, there was some real obvious signs before we even got married that this was going to be really hard.
So in conclusion, if you'd had the support, you'd still be there?
Without question.
Yeah.
I'm sad that what's happened has happened, but I know, and I'm comfortable knowing, that we did everything that we could to make it work, and we did everything on the exit process the way that it should have been done.
With as much respect.
With as much respect.
Oh my God, we just did everything we could to protect them.
So what do you say to the people who say that you came here, you made these multi-million-dollar deals, and that you were just money-grabbing royals?
First off, this was never the intention.
Yeah.
And we're certainly not complaining. Our life is great now. We've got a beautiful house. I've got a beautiful family. The dogs are really happy. But at the time, during COVID, the suggestion by a friend was, what about streamers?
Yeah, we genuinely hadn't thought of it
I
before.
never thought about it. So there was all sorts of different options. And look, from my perspective, all I needed was enough money to be able to pay for security, to keep my family safe.
How will you use Archwell as a means of speaking to things that are important to you in the world?
I think in creating, life is about storytelling, right? About the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we're told, what we buy into, and for us to be able to have storytelling through a truthful lens that hopefully is uplifting is going to be great. Knowing how many people that can land with, and being able to give a voice to a lot of people that are underrepresented and aren't really heard.
Did you leave the country because of racism?
It was a large part of it. Yeah. I remember that the Centre Bali fundraiser.
Yes.
One of the people at that dinner said to me, "Please don't do this with the media. They will destroy your life." This person is friends with a lot of the editors and like that. And I said, "Sorry, just elaborate. What do you mean by that?" Obviously, I knew. He said, "You need to understand that the UK is very bigoted." And I stopped him. I said, "The UK is not bigoted. The UK press is bigoted, specifically the tabloids. Is that what you mean?" He goes, "No, the UK is bigoted." And I said, I completely disagree. But unfortunately, if the source of information is inherently corrupt or racist or biased, then that filters out to the rest of society.
You've had these conversations with your family members. They know why you left. So has anybody said, "I'm sorry you had to make that move," or "I'm sorry you felt that you had to do that because you felt we were not supporting you"?
No, sadly not. The feeling is that this was our decision, therefore the consequences are on us. And despite 3 years of asking for help and seeing or visualizing how this might end, it was, I don't know, it's been really hard because I am part of the system with them. I always have been. But I guess I'm very aware of this, that my brother can't leave that system, but I have.
Does your brother want to leave the system?
I don't know, I can't speak for him. But with that relationship and that control and the fear by the UK tabloids, it's a toxic environment. But I will always be there for him. I will always be there for my family. And as I said, I've tried to help them to see what has happened.
Do they think it's a toxic environment, or do you all just think it's a toxic environment because you're now out of it? If we were to have an interview with them or a conversation with them, does your father think it's a toxic environment or relationship?
No, I think he's had to make peace with it.
And why couldn't you make peace with it? I'll ask that of both of you.
Because this was different, you know.
It's different because of the race?
And social media.
And social media. Oh, yes.
Right?
Different time. Different time.
That didn't exist. And so it was like the wild, wild west. It was spread like wildfire. Plus, my being American, it translated in a different way across the pond. So you had a noise level that was very different. But if they can't see that it's different.
So you felt bullied on an international level?
Look, I think the volume of what was coming in and the interest was greater because of social media, because of the fact that I was not just British, and that unfortunately, if members of his family say, well, this is what's happened to all of us, or if his, you know, if they can compare what the experience that I went through was similar to what has been shared with us. Kate was called Waity Katie, waiting to marry William. While I imagine that was really hard, and I can't picture what that felt like, this is not the same. And if a member of his family will comfortably say, we've all had to deal with things that are rude and racist are not the same. And equally, you've also had a press team that goes on the record to defend you, especially when they know something's not true. And that didn't happen for us.
You mentioned earlier, Harry, that you were hurt by the fact that there's been no acknowledgement on the part of your family that this was different because of race. Do you think there ever will be? And would that make a difference to you?
Yeah, I mean, it would make a huge difference. You know, as I said, there's a lot of people that have seen it for what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people. Like, it's talked about across the world. Yet, the very people that don't want to see it or can't see it choose not to see it. That announcement that we put out on the 8th of January in 2020, that was... The contents of that was put into a letter to the institution, to my father, which was then shared at the end of December while we were in Canada. And to then get back on the 6th, after my grandmother had said, the moment you land, come up to...
We asked if we could go up to see her.
Come up to Sandringham, we'd love to have a chat, come for tea, and why don't you stay for dinner, because it's going to be a long drive and you're going to be exhausted.
She even said stay the night.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
I'd love that.
Yeah.
The moment we landed in the UK, I got a message from my private secretary, Fiona, at the time.
Private secretary is sort of like a CEO role in the institution.
Cutting and pasting a message from the Queen's private secretary, basically saying, please pass on to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex that he cannot come to Norfolk. The Queen is busy. She's busy all week.
After she just invited you?
Yeah.
Just invited me. The Queen's busy. She's busy all week. Do not come up here. Okay. So I rang her from Frogmore that night and said, I was thinking about coming anyway, but I hear you're now busy. And she said, yes, there's something in my diary that I didn't know that I had. And I said, well, what about the rest of the week? She goes, well, that's busy now as well. Okay, I didn't want to push because I kind of knew what was going on. And then later that night...
But doesn't the Queen get to do, doesn't the Queen get to do what the Queen wants to do?
No, when you're head of the firm, there is people around you that give you advice.
Okay.
And what has also made me really sad is some of that advice has been really bad.